was thinking about it. Okay, cool. Okay, so we are live. Welcome to Reading Between the Lines. I'm Sarah, and I'm joined by my mom, Nicole. Hi, Mom.
Hello, this is so fun. I can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this. I have
I
lots
know.
to share this week.
So we're going to start off with, I don't know what we're calling this, if this is like a May recap or it's just what we're reading so far in May. So
It's pretty much May for me.
this is May. Okay. Welcome to what we've read in May. I also wanted, before we start, I wanted to do a little shout out to our one listener. There probably is more than one, but there's one very special listener in Tokyo. Can you guess who it is?
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh,
Tomoko is loves our podcast, and that really tickled me. She said she finds it very relaxing. So
wow, okay. Well, we're going to try to spice things up a little bit today. Now,
maybe.
I know I have several readers who are um, of my blog, Sister's Choice
Yeah.
Quilt, who have told me that they have listened to the
Oh, good.
podcast, and the feedback has been really positive. So I'm excited about that.
Cool. All right. So you have been globetrotting. Tell us where
I
you've been.
am traveling, and whenever I go on vacation with my family, I'm always on a mission to find interesting bookshops.
Yes.
And believe me, our itinerary included Edinburgh, Scotland, London, England, and Dublin, Ireland. And between those three cities, there are a lot of amazing bookstores. I'm going to start with Edinburgh
Okay.
because Edinburgh is considered to be one of the most bookish cities in the world.
Hmm.
There are a few other cities who can boast a higher per capita number of bookshops per citizen, but Edinburgh is right up there.
Okay.
And if you go to Edinburgh, no matter what your reading tastes, you will find a bookstore that has something that will suit your needs. For example, there was a shop called Elvis and Shakespeare,
Yes.
and they sold books and vinyl records, old vinyl records. And it looked like just a hole in the wall. And one nice feature about traveling in Edinburgh is that there is a city tram that goes from one end of the city to the other. And it's
Hmm.
extremely convenient to hop on, and then you can get off, buy a day pass, and you can pretty much get anywhere you want
Cool.
throughout the city. There was a shop that my son Aaron visited. We skipped it on his recommendation. It was called Armchair Books, and it is known for having used books of every description. And he described the place as just you walk in the door, and it's this labyrinth of passageways between stacks of books that are just piled up everywhere.
Is this the shop that didn't want to sell him anything?
Well, they got cross with him because
Yeah.
they evidently took down their do not pass barrier, and he ended up in an area of the bookshop that they didn't want customers to be frequenting. So he got scolded, and he was cross also because he couldn't find anything he wanted because there was no
Yeah.
discernible method of organization. But I did much better. One place that we visited that was just absolutely charming was a dual bookstore. One half of it is called McNaughton's, and the other half is called Type Wronger, as
Oh.
in typewriter, but type wronger.
Okay. Oh, I get it. Okay.
So McNaughton's sells used books, and they were getting ready for some kind of literary festival that was going to be taking place the following weekend. And even though they were busy and they were packaging up things to display at this festival, they were so accommodating and so friendly and so welcoming. The other half of this establishment is Type Wronger Books, which sells new books and is also a typewriter repair shop.
Because of course that's what
I know.
we need that. Yeah.
So and in between these books on the shelves, they would have an old Royal typewriter or an old Olivetti typewriter that I think the typewriters were for sale.
Cool.
And they also had a typewriter that belonged to some famous author, and people were invited to put a piece of paper in and actually type on the same typewriter keys that this famous person. Anyway,
Wow.
it was absolutely charming, and I made a small purchase. I bought one of the book bags that said "Type Wrong" or "Books" on it, and the
Love it.
proprietor made me an origami elephant out of a page from an old book, and he presented it to me as, maybe I'd like to give this to a grandchild, which of course I did. It was really hard to transport an origami elephant in my baggage, but it managed to come, back home
Was
pretty
it
much unscathed.
it was not flat, it was, like,
No, it
puffed
was
up?
like a little standing up elephant with big ears and a
Oh
tail and
my.
4 legs. Yeah, it
Wow.
was absolutely charming. Now, my favorite bookstore in Edinburgh was a place called Topping and Company Booksellers,
Okay.
and this place was housed in an old bank, and it had several floors, high ceilings, amazingly tall windows that not only let in
Mhm.
light, but, showcased these beautiful views all around, Edinburgh, and each room, as if you were in an old-fashioned house, you'd go up the stairs, and there'd be these various rooms off a hallway, and each room housed a separate genre of books. There might have been
Wow.
travel. I don't know what they had up there because I walked into the mystery and crime room and never
And
left.
never left. Yeah.
Well, when I finally did leave, I think I had 6 or 7 books. They tend to sell more paperbacks in, the UK and Ireland than they do in the US for sure. In fact, many books upon their being a new release, they're just released in, the large size paperback, not the trade paperbacks, but a good size one. I don't know the reason for this, but it is something that I've observed. And fortunately for traveling, buying paperbacks is a little bit easier to transport than hardback books would be.
Well, now this is a little bit opposite of what you were just saying, but I find that at least, and I could be quite wrong, so please someone tell me if I'm wrong because I wanna be wrong. I find that, like, Waterstones in the UK, they're much more likely to do a sprayed edge design and have
Right, and they
limited
have a lot of
hardbacks.
real special editions for classics in
I feel
particular.
like we don't have that at all here, but
Not so much. I mean, Fourth Wing is the notable exception.
yeah.
Last summer, everybody was dying to get their
But that
hands.
had to get, like, that much hype,
Yeah,
for it to happen to you for you to get a beautiful
that's true.
special edition. Anyway.
But anyway, this Topping and Company had room after room after room of amazing books. They are also known for having, in-person author events, and they
Mhm.
had many hand-lettered signs all over the place detailing upcoming author events that I mean,
Yeah.
if you lived in Edinburgh, I mean, I'd be there all the time. And they also had a lot of signed copies, and
Yeah.
I was able to get a couple of signed copies of books by
Ooh.
authors that I really admire.
Okay.
Now, London has a lot of bookstores as well. I have my favorites that I just keep going back to. The first one is Hatchard's Books, which is just a couple of doors down the street from Fortnum and Mason. So if you're
Mhm.
going to go and have tea or buy tea, you have to just go a couple of doors down and visit Hatchard's. Hatchard is the oldest bookstore in London, and I have to look at my notes here. It was established in 1797 at
Wow.
the exact location
Oh
that
my god.
you still find it. The staff is professional. They are friendly. It's almost like you've got your Downton Abbey people who are working at this bookstore. They speak melodiously and very properly. The, atmosphere, lots of polished hardwood, dark walls, books from floor to ceiling. It has an elegance about it
Mhm.
that is just really, really appealing. Now, probably well, my second favorite bookstore in London is Foyles. Foyles has 5 floors of of 5 levels of books.
Mhm.
They also have an enormous inventory. When you first walk in to the bookshop, you can see the levels of rising above you, and they have a very large sign that says, "Welcome, book lover. You are among friends."
Oh, I've
I
seen
tell you,
pictures of
I
that, yeah.
yeah, it's pretty well known. I got tears in my eyes the first time I saw that. I felt like I had absolutely come home. If you are a book lover and you go to London, you absolutely must not miss going to Foyles. They even have a coffee shop up on the 5th level, and, we went up there and had water and just relaxed for a while, and, the children's selection on the bottom floor is just amazing. Anyway, that's a must see. Lastly, in Marylebone, which is a very nice neighborhood in
Mm,
there is Daunt Books, and Daunt Books is also known for their amazing the architecture of the building is incredible. You walk in and there's this huge, arched window that's ahead of you that lets in all kinds of light. I think Daunt, may specialize in travel books, but they carry everything. They've got all the new releases. It's in a perfect location for having a lovely lunch. The tube stops are all convenient for it. So, anyway, those are my 3, top recommendations for London bookstores.
I
And as
love
far
it.
as Dublin goes, I there's my favorite place is Hodges and Figgis,
Hodges
and
and Figgis.
I never seem to stray too far away from that. They've got Easons, and I think there might be a Waterstones, but I know what suits me, and Hodges and Figgis rings the bells.
In the show notes, I will list all of the bookshops that mom just mentioned so that in the future, when you are traveling to the UK and you want to go visit some of these bookshops, you can.
Yep,
Um, cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we've been reading this May. I'm going to go first,
I think you
and
should.
I actually have a copy of the book, so let me show this. This is Real Americans by Rachel Kong. This was published April 30th of this year of 2024. Oh, are we going to be able to do this with the blurred background? Oh, should have thought about that. Let me cover my face. There you go. This
Oh,
is the
that
cover,
works.
sort of.
I'm really interested to
Anyway.
hear, what you thought about that because I ordered it from Book of the Month as well.
Oh, good. Okay. You know how I love a family saga. So this book is a true intergenerational Chinese American novel. It does span decades. It also spans cities and lots of different viewpoints. So it's blending reality and then a smidge of magical realism. Stay with me here if magical realism is really not your jam. It has also a touch of science, so really different. This felt more to me like a modern day pachinko. I think I say that every time I read a family saga. It has to be measured at the pachinko
It's
level.
kind of your standard against which
It
everything
is.
else must be compared.
Absolutely. And it reminded me of also uh, Gabriel Zevin's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Really? Uh-huh.
Yeah, it tackled love and technology in a coming of age story. So the story is split into 3 different parts following 3 generations within a family. There is a grandmother, a daughter, and then a grandson. We're taken again across 70 years from China um, to New York during Y2K, and then we jump into the year of 2030 from the grandson's perspective. So slightly not so distant future, which is my absolute favorite type of future.
Yeah.
I related the most to Lily because she clearly is exactly my age, growing up during like the same age as I was in the 2000s. Um, and it was interesting and kind of nostalgic to go through like reliving that time period. It was really well written overall. Rachel, this is of course not her first rodeo. She's written several books, but it was slightly disjointed in parts. I certainly liked part 1 the best over than part 2 and 3. The science and the magical realism part of the book is extremely underbaked. This is not heavy whatsoever. Um, I gave this 3 stars. I gave it 3 stars. It's written very well. I just felt there's a bit of disjointedness. And if I didn't mention this already, the publisher was Knopf.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Now this is really interesting. I've been trying to read books that are on my shelves,
Mhm.
and I picked 3 books that I thought were really recent purchases. They were all published. All 3 of these books were published in April of 2023.
So you're a year behind on your TBR.
Way more than that, but I just thought that was really strange. I thought I was reading fairly new releases, but anyway, let me proceed.
Okay.
My first book is called Adelaide. The author is Genevieve Wheeler, and it is a debut published in April 2023 by St. Martin's Press. And our main character is Adelaide Williams. She's an American who's living her dream in London when she meets and falls in love with a man that she considers her personal Prince Charming. His name is Rory Hughes. Now, this book is it's not a love story exactly because Rory doesn't reciprocate Adelaide's feelings.
Mhm.
When she's with him, her world lights up and she's filled with happiness and an overwhelming, almost obsessive desire to please him. She gives and she gives and she gives. And this is a story about women who, what women will do to try to hold on to a man that they think is their soulmate, even if it means sacrificing their own personality and identity.
Mm.
Yes. Now, many of us women who have been in love have been in a position, found ourselves in a position like this, where our feelings are not reciprocated at the same level or the same degree of intensity. And this is a cause of enormous unhappiness to us. So Adelaide is spending every waking moment trying to anticipate Rory's needs and
Mm.
provide him with the love, support, and every kindness she can think of. She bakes his favorite cookies. She does his laundry. Shows up when he's got the sniffles. And I mean, she's just always there at his beck and call. However, days will go by and she doesn't hear from him. And this may be after some kind of a significant moment in their relationship,
Mm.
something that they've shared that's been pretty special. And then he ghosts her for 4 days. She'll send him texts. He doesn't respond to her. He's always referencing his previous ex girlfriend. Anyway, this book could be really frustrating for
It's already frustrating me.
I know. So Adelaide is sweet. She's almost obsessive in her
Oof.
and she
So
totally
is she an unlikable character?
not really. She comes across as mentally unstable and
Oh.
absolutely desperate.
Ugh.
Absolutely desperate. And she's attractive and lovely and she has lots of female friends and her female friendships are really an important part of this book that kind of help her on the path to recovery from this guy. But while I
So
was reading the book, I kept talking out loud like, "Adelaide,
yeah.
what is wrong with you? I just want to shake her."
Are there
Because
any redeeming qualities to the book?
well, as I said, she's got really strong female friends who
Okay.
support her throughout this heartbreak. But overall, I was left feeling very sad for the main character's misplaced and obsessive devotion.
Oh,
And she does seem to get a clue by the end of the book. I
okay.
gave it 4 stars because it was actually quite relatable.
Sure.
Um, but overall,
Yeah.
keep that in mind, if
Yeah.
especially if you've ever been or recently been involved in a bad breakup. This
Yeah.
this may not be a
It
good
could
time.
be quite yeah, it reminds me a little bit of I mean, so even I mean, men go through this as well. I was
Sure.
thinking about Pretty in Pink with the character Ducky, who is in love with Molly Ringwald's character, and she just doesn't reciprocate whatsoever, and he's pretty
Mhm.
heartbroken. Anyway, okay. Well,
So,
thank
I
you.
mean, I hope that wasn't a lackluster description because I was really involved in the book, and
Yeah.
I was really hopeful for our main characters, the outcome for her to see the light and stop wasting her time with this man that
Yeah.
didn't really care.
It could be quite cathartic for some people, I would think, if they've
It
experienced this.
it
So,
could, it could.
all right. Well, in a totally different type of genre of book, of course, we get to talk about some YA. So I have Little Thieves. I thought this was newer than it was. It is not. It's by Margaret Owens, published October of 2021 by Henry Holt and Company. Now, that being said, with it being YA, I felt that was pretty mature. Um, so I'll just say that. So it's a YA novel, reads more mature. Our main character is Vanja. She's in debt to her adoptive godmothers, sorry, not grandmothers, but adoptive godmothers, who are the goddess of death and the goddess of fortune. So a year ago, she stole Princess Giselle's life to escape their demands on her, leaving Princess Giselle to be penniless and destitute. So now Vanja is masquerading as a princess. She can get into the wealthiest homes and she starts to steal a variety of jewelry and goods to sell to pay back the debt that she owes. Stick with me here. She's just one heist away from freedom. So for all of you who like that trope of like one more heist, one more, one more whatever before they can retire. So she's one more heist away from freedom. She's cursed herself. So she has been cursed to turn into jewels for her greed.
Oh,
She has 2 weeks to figure out how to stop this curse. So very slowly, parts of her body become jewel encrusted,
oh
which
no.
is
So she's gonna wake up one morning and find she's turned into a strand of pearls or something?
she starts to develop like on her skin, she'll develop like a rash of rubies.
Oh,
So
wow.
she has 2 weeks to break this curse. She gets to befriend a feral guardian half god who is a fantastic character. She needs to defeat Giselle's sinister fiance. She needs to outsmart an overly eager junior detective to save herself. It's really quite fun. There is
Sounds
definitely
like
a lot
there's a
happening.
lot going on.
There is. It's a thick book. This was like 500 plus pages. The
Why is it
characters
that the genre always is so long?
they're very prolific. The characters are incredibly lovable. There's a fun dose of hijinks and a very sweet enemies to lovers type of romance, which I typically hate. And this was really well done. Very enjoyable. There's also a part two to this and maybe a part three. I haven't read those. For me, this was 4 stars because I could tell that the author really was very interested in wanting to write this enemies to lovers thing happening. And I was just like, "Ugh, let's move on. Let's move on." Anyway, I loved it though. Great book.
Well, you've sold it. You've sold it really
Yeah.
successfully. Sounds good. All right, my next book has the most beautiful cover. It's called The Berry Pickers by
Did I
May.
buy this for you or did you buy this for you? I feel like
I know it was not book of the month,
I got
and
you a berry book, but I don't remember if that was it. Doesn't matter. Anyway,
I really wanted this, so you may have given it to me for Christmas.
maybe.
So, so if you did, thanks.
You're welcome.
And it was published in April 2023 by Catapult. And
Okay.
this book is interesting because it's an Own Voices debut.
Mm,
And the author has received many commendations for her books about and from the point of view of Indigenous peoples.
okay.
And she lives in Nova Scotia with her 2 fur babies, the book description says. But anyway, The Berry Pickers is a family saga. It did not remind me in the slightest of Pachinko.
Okay. Bummer.
Anyway, it's about an Indigenous family from the Micmac tribe.
Okay.
And the Micmac people live primarily in Nova Scotia, which is far if you think of the East Coast of the United States, you can see Maine, and then Maine kind of stretches up into
Yeah.
until it meets, Nova Scotia. And the Micmac people, this is set in 1962, and at that time, it was very common for the Micmac people to spend their summers traveling down to Maine to pick blueberries, which, of course, is a main crop in Maine.
Mm,
And the story begins with, in the summer of 1962, and Ruthie, who's a 4-year-old, child of the Micmac people, she is in the forest with her brother Joe. And I think the berry picking has finished for the day, and the family is starting to gather around the campfire where they prepare their evening meals and socialize with other neighboring individuals who are from their tribe. And Ruthie goes missing. She's there 1 minute. Joe leaves to go do something for a second. I don't know if he's distracted by an animal or he goes to check something out and he comes back and Ruthie is gone. And it just no explanation, no trace. And of course, the Micmac people are just devastated, and their lives are just torn upside down while they search and try to find any clue as to what could have happened to this little child. And it sparks a mystery that goes on for over 50 years. It's the book is written to show how this kind of trauma haunts survivors.
mm,
And it's especially challenging when a child goes missing and there's no answer. She's
yeah.
just gone. She's just disappeared.
I think also I just have to do a little side note is that I'm very interested in shining more light always on when Indigenous people have a missing female or a missing child because those stories never get quite enough attention
Well,
than
this
they
is going
should.
to be a theme not only in this book, but in the next book I'm going to talk about
Mhm.
how women, people of color, and people with very little means, in other words, poor,
Yeah.
are marginalized. And of
Yeah.
course, in the past, this was much more extreme than it is now. But um, nobody really paid attention to this family. Their tragedy was kind of discounted by local detectives.
Or
They
swept under the rug. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
they didn't put very many people on the
No.
case looking. So anyway, meanwhile, a young girl named Norma is growing up in Maine as the only child of an affluent family. Her father is strangely distant, and her mother is obsessively overprotective. Norma is haunted by nightmares and the sense that her parents are keeping a secret from her. Norma spends decades trying to unravel the truth about her origins. Why is her skin darker than her mother and
Mm,
father? She and an aunt are in Augusta, Maine for some
mhm.
visit, and there's an indigenous protest happening. This is probably a few years later, it's probably in the 70s. And Norma is now a young woman. She's probably 17, 18. And one of the young indigenous men calls out from the protest crowd, and he calls her Ruthie. He calls Ruthie. And this she always had an imaginary character growing up, and her imaginary character was named Ruthie, and that was her
Oh my
best friend.
gosh.
So, one thing leads to another, and it was a really compelling story about family love, devotion, secrets that are finally revealed, and honestly, the permanence of childhood trauma. Nobody gets over it. Nobody gets over.
Never. Yeah.
I gave this one 4.5 stars. It's a heavy
Wow.
topic, it ends
Mhm.
quickly, but
Okay.
yeah, it was and, you gotta give it extra points for that cover. That's such a beautiful cover.
Oh, yeah. That sounds really intriguing. I didn't realize that one was quite as heavy as it is. So, I
Yeah.
mean, not physically, but I mean, method. No, what am I trying to say? The story is heavy.
But the way it's written, I mean, Norma, aka Ruthie, she grows up, she gets a good education. Her parents are
Mm.
definitely weird, but she does have this really supportive aunt who I think who does know Ruthie's
Oh,
origin. And anyway, Norma's life isn't terrible. On the other hand, her family just seems to be the victim of one misfortune after another. And it's really heartbreaking what that family had to go through.
mm, okay.
What have you got next?
Well,
Something
I've got a
uplifting?
not exactly. I have a thriller for us. Now, you may have read this because I borrowed this from your Kindle, or because we have a shared library. So this is
Right,
The
right.
Missing Sister. The Missing Sister by L. Marr. Did you read that?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Well, you might want to.
I
You
have a lot of books on my Kindle that are remaining to be read, so I'm glad you're bringing this to my attention.
I think every time we talk, because this is my favorite trope ever, the creepy twin trope,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So this is,
Trove, okay.
yeah, this is a creepy twin book. So Shayna is mourning her parents' death. They died recently. She is hit with another shock when her estranged twin Angela is found dead in the Seine, so in Paris. And it's potentially a serial killer attack. So her sister may have been a victim of a serial killer. So Shanna needs to go to Paris to clean out Angela's apartment. And when she's there, she finds a coded message in their shared twin language that they created as children.
Good
And the
grief.
and the code is, or the message is, alive, trust no one. So she ends up, Shayna
Wow, that just
identifies,
gave me chills all
right?
over.
I know, it's so good. Okay, so she identifies the remains of Angela's body and starts searching for her missing sister. So now, what I just said was confusing. She identifies the remains of her sister, but she's still not entirely sure that it's her sister because
Okay,
the body's been in a river for a week. Anyway,
okay.
she gets closer to the truth of the killer, then she realizes that she may also be at risk. There are very few characters in this book. So I could count them all on one hand, which I kind of like because you know how I can't stand
Well,
books with
yeah,
like a
right.
zillion
So,
characters.
character overload,
Um,
that's good.
each of these characters are really well developed. Um, And as I said, like, I really enjoy this creepy twin thriller kind of vibe where one is evil and the other isn't, and you have to figure out who is who. But this went a little deeper and was different, which I liked. Um, it explored really realistic issues that come up when you have twins, especially as children, like how to emotionally regulate yourself without your sibling, with you, um, that codependency that can develop between two twin siblings. I found the ending fell apart for me and it seemed a little bit rushed, or maybe I was rushing to get through it. I don't know. I gave it 3 stars, but actually I upped it to 4 because, again, the story is really well written. If you love Paris, if you are familiar with all the different neighborhoods in Paris, then this is something that you have to read because it's really fun. It's action packed, it's cinematic. You're just exploring all of these neighborhoods. So yeah, I think it's a must read.
Wow. Repeat the title
Mhm.
and the author for me, would you?
The Missing Sister by L. Marr, and that was published by Thomas and Mercer.
Well, I will definitely be looking that up in my Kindle library.
Mhm. So
That's the
do you have one
500 other titles.
do you have one more? Or are we talking about backlist now?
No, I have one more and it's a good
Okay.
one.
Okay, good.
The House is on Fire by Rachel Beanland. If that author's name sounds familiar, she wrote a book. Her debut book was called Florence Adler Swims Forever,
Okay.
which I did not love as much as I really, really liked this one. So Here's an example of the sophomore effort, in my opinion, being better than the debut.
Okay.
This was a Book of the Month selection. It was originally published in April 2023 by Simon and Schuster.
Okay.
And this book is based on a true event. The house is on fire refers to a devastating fire that took place in Richmond, Virginia in 1811, the day after Christmas. This was the only theater in Richmond, and because it was the holidays, it wasn't a holiday performance, but because it was during the holiday season, they got a lot of people coming to this performance the day after Christmas. And my understanding is that the theater was packed with 600 people.
This is sounding familiar. Yes.
And there were 3 levels in the theater. There was the ground floor, of course. There was a second level where there were a lot of women. The seats were a little cheaper. And the third level was people of color. And in Richmond, Virginia, there was a very high population of slaves at that time.
Okay.
They enjoyed quite a lot of, many of them enjoyed a lot of freedom in their time off, which would allow them to go to a theatrical presentation in their town. I mean, it sounds like everybody in town was there. So a fire breaks out, and the way the fire broke out led me to have a really interesting legal conversation with my husband as to who legally would be at fault. There's a 12-year-old stagehand named Jack, and his responsibility was to raise and lower a chandelier that had lit candles on it. And there was a scene in the play that involved a drawing room that had this chandelier hanging. And the following scene was a forest scene. Well, our lad Jack forgot to raise the chandelier. And so the production manager of the theatrical group scolded Jack and said, you raise that chandelier. It doesn't belong in the forest. What is the matter with you? Raise that up right now. And Jack knew that a lot of painted canvas scenery was stored up in the rafters. And if he were to raise that, light it, because you
Oil.
want to raise it before you blew out the candles. If he were to raise that chandelier immediately without blowing out the candles, as he was instructed by his boss, a fire would very likely be the result.
Yeah.
And he put forth his objections. And he said, this is going to cause a fire. This is really dangerous. You don't want to do that. And the manager kept insisting, do it now. And so this young 12-year-old boy did as he was told. And the result was that a terrible, devastating fire that cost hundreds of people their lives was, the ensuing result. So legally, if you're told to do something that you know is wrong by your employer, are you legally responsible for the results, or are
Well,
they?
first of all, we got some child labor issues
Oh,
happening here.
that's a 12-year-old kid.
So,
Okay.
okay, there's that. Okay. Well, I'm curious to know what Dad said, but I mean, you have a moral obligation to do the right thing anyway, and that's why we have whistleblowers. But
Right. Well, what happened when the fire started is really what the book is all about. I mean, I thought this little legal issue was just an interesting sideline. And it turns out legally, it seems not if you're a kid, but if you're an adult and you're told to do something and you know it's wrong and you do it anyway, you could be held legally responsible.
oh,
Even
yep,
if your job was on the line, if you knew
yep,
something was wrong and you did it, you
yep,
made a big mistake.
yeah,
So anyway, what this book is about is it gave a lot of historical insight
yeah.
to societal norms at the time. And we talked a little bit about how women, people of color, and people with no money are marginalized and not
Mhm.
taken seriously, not listened to. Well, it turns out they're not treated very well either if there's a riot and white men are trying to get out of a building.
Right.
I mean, there were wives of some of these men who were just stepped on by their husbands' eagerness to get out of this burning building, and these women were left behind.
Mhm.
Many of the women were on the second floor, and the only way out, because the stairways had collapsed, the floors had collapsed in some places, was for them to jump out of these second-story windows.
Mhm.
The book is from the point of view of four people. There's, Jack, the boy I mentioned. There's Sally, a white woman who's been recently widowed. There's Cecily, a slave who had attended the performance with her mistress, and, Gilbert, a slave who just happened by and started doing everything he could to help save people,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't his job. He
Right.
So Gilbert would stand below the second floor window and encourage these poor women to jump into his arms. He was a very large, strong man,
Mm.
and he actually was able to do this until I guess there was a woman who was, generously proportioned, and she pretty much knocked him flat and put a stop to his rescue efforts.
Yeah.
But anyway, there were a lot of people that were injured, and Sally, the white woman who was the widow, was very active in trying to care for people who had these terrible burns, multiple broken bones. I mean, is this really happened? We don't.
Yeah.
I had never heard of it before. Have had you?
I think you had mentioned this book to me, but so it sounds familiar to me, but I don't really know the story.
Well, it certainly gave me a lot to think about. I mean, it was really difficult to be a woman or a person of color at that
Yeah.
time. But what was really heartwarming about the book is how the most unlikely people stepped up to
Right.
help. And it was a really interesting character study also on the moral failings
Yeah.
of people who you thought were going to be an upstanding
Mhm.
person in the community, and they just failed miserably to support their own wives, and
Absolutely.
and in the aftermath they were pretty cavalier about helping the survivors. It was a real
Yeah.
contrast between admirable behavior and despicable behavior, and
Mhm.
the author clearly did a ton of research historically on this real life event. It was a really, compelling book. I highly recommend it.
This might be one of those that Liz likes. I know Liz tends to like
Oh, yeah?
more of these historical fiction.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, for backlist, let's we I didn't write down a backlist because we are going to talk about your backlist. So you go
Well,
ahead.
it's kind of a shared backlist.
Turn
I
your
mean,
notifications off. Can you
uh, how do I do that?
make your sister stop texting you?
It's okay, let me see here. Will airplane mode do it?
On your phone, yes, but on your computer, you need to go to the do not disturb section. It's on the top right. You see like little sliders next to a magnifying glass icon.
I'm afraid I'm gonna lose you if I'm
Yeah, don't turn your computer to airplane mode.
okay, exit full screen.
So in the very top bar on the right, next to like the date, do you see little sliders next to a magnifying glass icon?
Yes.
Click that, and then there's a like a focus button or a do not disturb button. Do you see that?
No. Oh, yes.
So click it.
Okay.
Click it. Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
okay. I'm so sorry about that.
That's all right. Now we
I
know.
se I seem to be popular with my family all of a sudden.
Okay, I
Ah,
have the book, so I'm gonna hold it up. I'm gonna cover my face and see if it works. If I can.
I'm gonna hold up the
Oh,
book
you
too.
have it too. Okay, fine.
Yes. So, for all of you listeners or viewers, this is my backlist book, but it turns out it's a book that Sarah also started to read and hated.
I
I
hated.
loved this book. I gave it 5
Ah,
stars. So,
5 is so many.
so fasten your seatbelt for a lively discussion. The Light Pirate is by Lily Brooks Dalton. This was again a book of the month club. I'm really trying to read up my BOM books. And it was published by Grand Central Publishing in December of 2022. So it came to my attention that Sarah had rated this book 1 star on Goodreads.
If there
And
were
so
less stars, I would have
I,
chosen
I'm
that.
really interested in talking to you about it because clearly we had wildly differing opinions. Um, I don't typically read science fiction. This book could be categorized as cli-fi, which is climate fiction.
Yeah,
And
until you had wrote that, I
oh,
didn't realize
really?
that was a
It's a thing.
thing.
It's
Cli-fi
a
is a
thing.
thing.
And
Yeah.
usually cli-fi is dystopian. It's usually a disaster has happened to the world as we know it because of our
Would you say that Station 11, is that considered cli-fi?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Just to give
Well,
people another
I
example.
forget, in Station 11, did everybody die because of the climate change or because they all got sick with some bug or flu or something?
I don't know, I didn't like that book either.
It's another good what's the matter with you? Anyway, cli-fi is a thing, and, I don't usually read that type of book, but once in a while, there's a good one that gets a lot of hype, and, this one had been kind of under my radar, but it was on my shelf, and I had bought it, so I was determined I was gonna read it and not waste my money. Um, this book is set in the not too distant future,
My favorite
and,
place.
I found it to be disturbing, frightening, and totally engrossing. Climate change has altered the world as we know it, with parts of the U.S. falling into the sea, devastating hurricanes on the East Coast, uncontrolled wildfires on the West Coast, um, tornadoes in the middle of the country. I mean, everything that could go wrong with our climate is starting to go wrong. And in particular, since our book is set in on the Florida coast, Florida is just crumbling into the ocean. The ocean
Yep,
is taking over.
yep,
All the beachfront properties, all the big hotels, they're all
gone.
underwater. Yeah.
Mhm.
And as her home state spirals out of control, our main character um, is left to deal with the world on her own pretty much. I got some Where the Crawdads Sing vibes from this book. Our
Mhm.
main character is a little 9-year-old girl named Wanda who's born during a hurricane. And I know that this is why you probably didn't like the book because the the book starts out with a family, a wife they have 2 boys, a dad and a mom, 2 boys, and the mother is expecting a baby. The dad is, he works as a lineman, and when electricity fails, which it's doing all the time now because, the world is falling apart, he's always out on a job somewhere instead of being with his family who needs him.
Right.
His 2 boys are 8 and 10, I think, and they are kinda out of control. Nobody's paying attention, they're desperate for their dad's, attention. Their stepmother, who's the dad's new wife, they don't really care for.
She's young too.
She's
And
younger, yeah, and she is expecting a baby. So, a hurricane is coming, big hurricane. Is dad home? No,
no,
he's out trying to restore electricity to people.
stepmom's napping, which is
The
I mean,
stepmom is napping because she's about to go into labor. The 2 boys are supposed to be sitting watching TV and not getting into trouble, and they take it into their heads to go visit that, trailer park nearby right as the storm is starting,
yeah.
and when the mother realizes the kids are missing, she's in labor and she goes out into the hurricane to look for them. So for a person with low tolerance for people behaving with bad judgment, Sarah, I can see that this book would have lost you in the first 40 pages.
Everybody's stupid. Yeah.
Everybody makes really, really bad choices. So I don't want to spoil anything, but uh, Wanda is the child's name, named after the hurricane that has destroyed her family. And Wanda is left to grow up with her dad, and he again is absent a good deal of the time because he's out trying to help people have electricity. Anyway, as time progresses, there's just complete havoc in Florida, and Wanda ends up pretty much on her own, supporting herself in this swamp, which is why it reminded me of where the
Yeah.
crawdads sing. Um, she navigates this world of increasing wilderness in a way that's really plucky and smart, and she does manage to survive. There are other characters in the book, and it's kind of heartwarming to see community coming together and people
Hmm.
supporting one another. They're not related. They have no reason to support each other except for their
Yeah.
mutual survival.
Hmm.
And it was an interesting study on how the world would change, uh, not just because of the climate and environment, but I mean, there was no money anymore. I mean, there's so many
Right. No
repercussions.
currency.
Yeah,
No way to exchange currency.
and no real politics. I mean, everybody was
Nope.
kind of on their own. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was compelling. Once you got past the bad decisions, you know,
Well,
Wanda was kinda on her own, and she got to be 9 years old, and now she had a little canoe, and she was going all over the swamp,
for
finding food and plants and figuring out how to
I
survive.
do I do want to say, just in the very unlikely event that Lily Brooks Dalton is actually listening to this, this is written really well. Like, she is a wonderful writer and a storyteller.
Yep.
A lot of reviews also will corroborate with me that this is an immersive feeling book. You are there, it's a time, it's a place. You are absolutely right there with everybody. The sci-fi element of Wanda, and I don't know if this spoils it, but she basically is evolved, right? She has evolved to adapt to her surroundings, would you
Yeah,
say?
and I don't that bordered on magical realism,
Yes.
and I was not satisfied with the explanation or the lack of
Okay.
explanation. Uh,
That annoyed me so much. I did not understand what the hell was happening with
yeah,
her.
yeah, I was confused too.
So,
I think the author could have left that out or handled it a little bit differently, but, other than that aspect, which I think was maybe a mistake on the author's part to include, I really enjoyed the book.
I
I
just I couldn't get into it again, as you said, because people were making stupid choices in the very beginning of the book, but it didn't seem realistic. Who's gonna let these little kids be unsupervised and I mean, maybe this does happen. I guess it does happen. I don't know. It was just really hard to suspend belief that no one was paying attention to these poor kids in the middle of a hurricane. That this woman, of course, has to give birth in the middle of the hurricane, and then she's like out
well,
in the
I
chicken coop giving
I
birth
went
or
I
something.
know, she's out in the shed.
Good
I
grief.
went with it because people were told to evacuate, and the whole trailer camp had evacuated. The people in the town,
Everybody else left, but they didn't. Just
everyone else
saying.
got a clue that this was not a safe place, and, yeah, that's why there was nobody
Uh,
around to notice these 2 lads going into unlocked trailers at the trailer camp.
I just couldn't. And also, maybe this isn't my type of near distant future that I like. This was very like going back to survival and bare bones. And I like more of the technology aspect of like
Well,
the
I tell you,
positive changes in the future.
scared the liver out of me just thinking, you know what, if I'm not going to preach, but wow, if we don't start taking care of our planet, who knows what could happen.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And again, many, many people enjoyed this book. So just because I'm being a poor
Well,
sport
I
about
hope
it,
some of you will
hopefully try it. Um, so what's up next for you? As we head into June, Mom, let's wrap up with talking about what we are looking forward to reading.
you want to go first?
Yes, I was recently gifted from my amazing stepson and his girlfriend the complete Shogun novel by James, oh gosh, oh shoot,
Clavel. Clavel.
Clavel. Okay. Now, I went to the library first to try to get this book and I did. I was successful. All 1,000 million pages of it on like printed on Bible paper. Like this is a big thick book, but I got part 2. I didn't even get part 1, and so I couldn't read it. So
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
very thankful that I was given the complete novel. I don't understand how the one that I have now, which is
It,
quite beautiful. Let me grab it.
can you lift it? Is it?
Yeah, it's the same amount of pages. So I'm wondering if this is like annotate, not annotate. What's the word when it's
Yeah,
abridged? I don't know.
bridged.
Anyway, it's beautiful. If you could, there it is. Uh, yeah. So this is Shogun, and this is golly, how many pages? So many, about over 1,300 pages, and it's printed really small. It's on really thin paper, but I'm talking about this because this is historical Japanese fiction, and it was recently made into a FX series on Hulu. It is an absolute must. It's a mini series that they somehow managed to cram 1,300 pages into like 12 episodes. Fantastic. A stunning show.
Let
And
me
I've heard the
interject.
book is better. Yeah.
Back in the 70s, I think, Richard Chamberlain, who was a very popular actor, he was the star in the Dr. Kildare series. He was also
Yeah.
in the movie The Thornbirds, but there was a TV adaptation of Shogun, and he played the lead character, the American.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
was really well done too. It got, I mean,
Oh, I want to watch that.
I want to watch the new one, but if you're now that you
Hmm.
mentioned it and brought it to my attention, but if you can dig up the old one too with Richard Chamberlain, that was really
I
good.
will look into that. My husband Jeff watched it and he remembered it and he said it was fantastic, but that this new one is better.
Really,
Um,
probably better
absolutely.
than all that.
There's a ton of special effects. They're so good. I think the characters in this book are absolutely incredibly well developed. There's one character who is not necessarily a main character. She's a side character and she is snarky. She is fantastic. She is just cranky and mad at the world, and I love her. So anyway,
Well, you know what you might consider? I know there's a name for doing this. It's when it's kind of a mixed media approach to reading a book. You might try buying it and having it on your Kindle because you can adjust the font to be
okay,
more readable and big for yourself.
for myself, yeah.
So, watch the series, and you also might think about trying an audio and reading and listening along
Okay.
at the same time.
Oh, it's going to take me a year to get through this
You
book,
know what?
but
I thought the same thing. I wanted to re-experience Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry,
mhm,
which is
yeah,
another super long one, and I read the book in the '80s, and I watched the TV the series, mini series, I guess they called it, back in the day, and I also rewatched it again while I was reading the book. And this was gonna be my long read, my slow and steady read. I was gonna drag this out.
yeah,
The people from the bookshelf Thomasville have chosen this book as a slow and steady read, and they conquer a classic every year, and they read,
mhm,
a few chapters every month until they get through the book. I
mhm.
was so engrossed in this book, I couldn't put it down, and you're gonna be finding yourself the same way with, Shogun, I think.
I'm
And
excited.
I just kept plowing ahead, and I did, watch the miniseries along with reading the book.
Oh,
added another element to it.
How
So
fun.
try to coordinate the timing of watching the miniseries with where you are in the book,
Okay.
and that might enhance
I
the
think also like for some people who like what's her name? I am a big fan of the main actress in I think it's the Eye of the World series.
I don't know.
Um Her name is Rosamund Pike. I love
Oh,
her.
yes. She's
And
a great actress.
anyway, that's a huge, long, ginormous book series as well. And that might be really daunting for a lot of people. I think there's like 12 books or something. But
Wow.
the series is fantastic. And it also helps people like me who can't handle
A
tons of
lot of characters.
characters.
You
Having
know,
that visual
that
helps.
same vein, the Poldark series and the
Oh,
Pol
yeah.
that TV series was superb. I mean, there's several seasons of
Hmm.
Poldark episodes, and watch them right along with whatever book is being featured in that
Yeah.
season. And I think it adds to the whole experience.
Um, Go ahead. Oh, let me just say one more thing about Shogun. This is basically about an Englishman named John Blackthorne who gets lost at sea. It is up to you to decide at first whether he is a merchant or if he is a pirate. And he gets basically kind of captured by the Japanese. There's also the Portuguese are also hanging out in Japan at that time, and there's samurai, there's a lot of political intrigue, and he can't speak the language, this our main character. So he has to figure out, if he's ever going to get his ship back, if he actually wants to go back. He does at one point he decides probably that maybe he wants to stay in Japan. Anyway, it's fantastic, great series. Okay, your turn, Mom.
Okay, now you got me thinking. I might want to give that one a try too. All right, up next for me, I want something lighter. I want something fun, and I want something that's ultimately hopeful. So, some books on my up next list are Colton Gentry's Third Act by Jeff Zentner. This book is about a disgraced country western star.
Oh, how fun.
You remember back in the day, I don't know if it was in the
Yes.
90s, the Dixie Chicks made some kind of blunder and they
Mm,
criticized the president that was in office at the time, and they got a
yeah.
big backlash. Well, Colton Gentry, he has recently lost a friend to a gunshot incident, and he's very anti-gun right now.
Mm,
And he gets a little bit looped at one of his concerts, and he starts going off on this diatribe how guns are bad and we shouldn't have guns, and he basically gets canceled.
yeah.
And his career has just like gone down the tubes. So this book is about a man who gets a chance to do things over again and make things right. So and I've heard a lot of good things about it.
And it's fun. You said it's like kind of light and tongue in cheek, kind of funny.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, just what I need. Now the
Cool.
other book, you might like it. The book is called Sipsworth by Simon Van Boy,
Okay.
and it's a book about a grieving widow who returns to her home village in the English countryside after being gone for 6 decades. So she's
Oh
an
my
old lady.
gosh. Okay.
She's grieving, she's going home. All she wants to do is die.
Oh, yeah,
Until
it sounds like I'll love this.
Okay, so
I'm
she
kidding.
wants
I'm
to
kidding.
try
Uh-huh.
until, this is a quote, until a chance encounter with a mouse sets her on a surprising journey.
Oh.
Unquote.
Are we slightly magical? Is this like kind of a fairy tale thing or
I
what
don't
is
know, but
happening
it's
here?
another book about second chances and a chance to get it right. And
Oh.
if a mouse is involved in some way and it gets this poor woman out of her funk, I'm on board.
Wow, that sounds adorable. Okay.
And it's getting good reviews as a real, if you like curmudgeon books, like
Sure.
what was that book by Mike Gale about I forget the name of it. But anyway, I love a good curmudgeon book
Yeah.
where the main character is a big grump and there's found family. He meets people that are his neighbors and he's mean to them at first, but then one thing leads to another, and the chipper neighbor just won't give up and they become friends and his life starts to have meaning again.
That sounds like that Jack Nicholson movie with Helen Hunt,
Yeah.
whatever that was called. Anyway, neat. Well, okay, that'll wrap it up for us
I
for
think we
our
haven't gone too long, in time. We have both had a lot to say about.
yeah, we sure did. That's okay. Cool. Well, let's do this again in a few weeks, and then we will be back with more great reads and suggestions. And neither one of us, I think, are traveling, so no, we don't have any
No, no,
proposed
no,
bookshop reviews coming up.
no,
But yeah.
unfortunately, but just, all about books. Speaking of which, I listened to another book podcast,
Hmm.
just the other day, and they spent so much time with preliminary chit chat before they got to actually talking about books. It was like 12 minutes into the show, and so I'm glad we are making a
Just
pact to devote
diving
ourselves
right in.
trying to keep
Um,
topic with books and bookstores and book things related that are book related.
if you are listening and you've made it this far, thank you. But also, coming up in the next few episodes, I've got two authors that I'll be interviewing, Krista Maravilla and Sierra Cross. And then I'll also be having some, I don't know what to call them yet. I need to come up with a good name for them. But my brother and I will be chatting about different themes in sci fi, like dimensional travel or the character of the devil showing up in different ways in different stories, things like that. So we've got that coming up as well. So
He's really excited about it, and one topic he knows he wants to bring up is the multiverse concept.
yes, I don't know a lot about this. Well, actually, never mind. Don't get me started. I have one book recommendation that by a very popular famous author who writes about multiverses, and I think a lot of people would enjoy it. So
Great.
anyway,
I look
cool.
forward to that too.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.